Ms. Madeleine Klein. We are back to discuss another round of updates related to the disappearance of Jack and Lily Sullivan. We're now reaching the 6-month mark of this case, I just realized. We're recording this on the evening of the 24th of October, so we're just about a week away from a half a year of searching for Jack and Lily. And that's shocking to say.
Yeah, considering that our first episode, we weren't even sure it would be published because we were hoping that the kids would be found before editing was done. And yeah, we never thought we'd be here.
No, here we are, but let's get into it here. We got quite a bit to discuss. We're going to pick up the conversation we started in part 11 of this series, where we were just unpacking the details found in a series of released search and seizure document applications. Hopefully I don't got to go too in-depth explaining what they are, but basically if investigators, if the police, in this case the RCMP, want to access information like banking information, cell phone records, whatnot, they need to get the court's approval to get basically what people would refer to as a warrant. Those search and seizure applications eventually become public. In this case, in Jack and Lily's disappearance, they were unsealed by the courts, but not in their entirety. There were large portions of it that basically just black boxes of redacted information. But that's where things get interesting now is CBC weren't happy with the amount of redactions, and they challenged the courts saying, this seems excessive. There should be less information redacted. Can you please review those documents again? And if there's anything else you can release, now's the time to do it.
I had no idea you can do that. Be like, no, this isn't good enough. I need you to redact or to remove some of these redactions.
Redact the redactions. Well, it seems that
the redactions.
It seems that you can, and CBC was victorious in that little battle. Just this past Friday, the Nova Scotia courts again unsealed the documents related to search warrant applications in Jack and Lily's case, this time with quite a few less redactions. So we have a bit more information to go through. And in this episode tonight, we can go through kind of the more interesting new details that are surfacing through the less redacted court documents. And now I should also just recap this, is that these search and seizure applications, for the most part, were filed about a month after the children went missing, like late May to early June. And what they give us is a bird's eye view of the investigators' case, the information they've collected, and the directions they were looking at that point. So keep in mind that what we're going to be talking about is not like people who came forward with witness statements at this point almost 6 months later. We're going to be hearing information that was collected in the days, if not weeks, after Jack and Lily's disappearance.
It's really worth noting that what we're going over today, like you said, is not like new information. People weren't withholding their statements or what they saw. We just haven't been able to access it yet.
Yeah, and and I think the reason we're both saying that is that's a misconception. When these redactions were lifted just this past Friday, there were several news reports on CBC and other outlets talking about these new witnesses who claimed to hear things the night the children were last seen. And a lot of people responding to that were like, where were these people, days after the kids went missing? Why are they coming forward now, 5 or 6 months later? People aren't realizing that these are people who did come forward, but that information is just becoming public now. So I think we gave a bit of teaser of what's to come is with the removal of these redactions, one thing we're going to hear about is 2 ear witnesses, we'll call them, people who live in the area surrounding the children's home that claim they heard some suspicious things the night before the children were reported missing. We'll talk about that, but there's also quite a few other portions of the documents where we get a bit more information. So we got a lot to get into, but I think the ear witnesses, as I'll call them, are probably going to make up the majority of our conversation. The details that they share has driven the conversation around this case quite a bit over the last probably 3 or 4 days, because as I said, there have been quite a few news articles covering this new information.
For the first time, we're hearing detailed accounts from neighbors who were awake in the quiet hours before 4-year-old Jack and 6-year-old Lily Sullivan disappeared from their home in Pictou County. The children were reported missing from their home at 10:01 on the morning of Friday, May 2nd. According to court documents, neighbor Brad Wong told police he heard a loud vehicle coming and going 3 or 4 times after midnight and into the early hours of the morning. Another neighbor, Justin Smith, told RCMP that at 1:30 a.m., he heard a car turn around by the railroad tracks near the area of Gairloch Road and Lansdowne Station Road.
So as we just heard, Madeleine, we have two new ear witnesses to talk about. The word ear witness is weird, but that's the word for it, right? An eyewitness sees something, an ear witness hears something.
Well, I was just about to ask if that's like a legitimate term.
It must be.
But witnessing something has to do with your eyes.
Well, I think it has to do with your senses.
So what happened? Witness? No.
It can't be your senses either, because if you touch something, did you witness the texture of that?
Yeah.
I think an ear witness and an eye witness is a thing.
Really? Okay. Well, I learned something today. Anyway, moving on.
If it isn't a thing, I think it's self-explanatory. We're going to be talking about ear witnesses.
These people heard something.
So let's start with the first one. And what we'll do is we'll go through the way these statements and these witnesses are described in the documents. And then we can talk a little bit about what makes this some pretty sketchy information, because although it is interesting, it's very sketchy how this all happens. Let's start with the first gentleman whose statement is now unsealed. His name is Brad Wong. So I'm just going to read you right from the document here. On May 9th, 2025, Constable McKenzie and Constable McKendrick had a conversation with Brad Wong. The following is a summary. Brad Wong said he did not wish to provide an official statement, but was willing to have a conversation with police. He said in the early hours of May 2nd, 2025, he heard a loud vehicle coming and going in the area of 1407 Gairloch Road. He said his residence is at an elevated position from Daniel's residence, and he could see the vehicle's lights over the treetops. He said the vehicle left 3 or 4 times after midnight and into the early hours of the morning. He said the vehicle would drive off in the distance, he could hear it stop, and then return. He said it remained in earshot the entire time. So that is the extent of his statement. So let's talk a little bit about a few things. For one, we know that the police would have taken this seriously based on the fact that purely they included it in their search and seizure application, even more so by the fact that they originally redacted this. This was information that as of about a month ago, they did not want the public to know. They redacted it in the first unsealing of these documents, but it is now publicly available and unredacted in the new release. But just bird's eye view, what do you make of this statement?
We knew this information long ago.
We knew some basics about it. We knew that there was somebody who had heard something, and they could even go as far as to describe the, what type of engine it is.
It was a 5-speed or 6-speed engine.
Yeah, we don't know if that is this Mr. Brad Wong.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, but we did know that there was someone who claimed to have heard something. We don't know if it's this guy, though.
This guy is a regular witness as well, because he saw car lights above the tree. Excuse me.
Yeah, claims to.
So
my thing with this guy is, like, it's very interesting. If he hears cars coming and going from the area of the house, it's a rural area, so there shouldn't be a lot of traffic. He's also claiming to see lights, which is interesting. I find it really weird that he didn't want to give a statement.
That's kind of what stuck out to me too. Like, why? But you'll talk to the police. What's the difference?
Yeah, it seems like there's not it's a pretty thin line between like talking to the police and having them write down what you're saying and like giving them a statement. I know that this guy has a bit of a checkered background. Like, people have Googled his history and stuff and see that he has some reasons to not like police officers. So it could be something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, without going too far into it, you can imagine he's someone who would have had several interactions with law enforcement.
Okay.
And when I'm saying that, I'm not trying to discredit him. I'm just trying to think of why he wouldn't want to give a statement related to information he may have concerning 2 missing children. I can't really explain why I wouldn't want to just give that information, even if I didn't like cops and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. But people are different. You know, everyone's living their lives the way they see fit. So.
Yeah. So there's this one guy, as we just heard, Brad Wong. He claims to hear and see cars coming and going from the area of Daniel's house. If that's correct and he's accurate and this in fact happened the way he said it did, that is, a huge piece of information. But there's someone else who claims to hear something. So I'm going to read you the second statement that is now available in the lesser redacted documents. This is a statement from someone named Justin Smith. On May 17th of 2025, Constable Donaldson took a statement from Justin Smith, who lives in the area where Jack and Lily went missing. The following is a summary. On Thursday night into Friday morning, he was up until about 1 a.m. on Facebook. Around 1:30 a.m., he thought he heard a car on Highway 289 turn around by the railroad tracks near the area of Garlick Road and Lansdowne Station Road. It made some noise, and then it went quiet. The vehicle was quiet for about 2 minutes and then drove towards Larg Road. He later spoke with Brad Wong, who informed him that Daniel's vehicle was coming and going 5 or 6 times that night. Wong told Smith that the car he heard was likely Daniel's. It's interesting. To boil this all down, what he's saying is like, I heard a vehicle moving around in the area the kids went missing around 1:30 a.m. He tells that, before he tells the police, he tells that to his other neighbor, who we already heard about, Brad Wong, and Brad Wong tells him, like, what you heard was Daniel's car coming and going. Which to me, like, it discredits their statements. The fact that they talked before coming to the police. Like, what do you make of that? I think it's weird that the guy that didn't want to give a statement is telling this guy what you heard is Daniel's car.
Well, we have to remember that this is a small town. It's, like these guys, this is just what they do. And I mean, I can't say I would do any different if I lived in a place like that. Like, you notice stuff happening and you take kind of a mental note of it, especially if it's out of the ordinary. Yeah. But the fact that both of these men claim that they heard something the same night, which they normally wouldn't, because it's a quiet area over there. You would think, but why? I also think, why would you remember it? Because when they heard this, like, the early Friday morning, before the kids were reported missing, before anyone had any reason to be paying attention to Daniel's home, why would you even remember that? Like, if you asked me today what I heard last night before I went to bed, did you hear a car? I would never have noticed that, let alone I heard it and it went here and then it stopped and it turned this way and then it stopped. My fundamental issue with these statements is, why would you even remember this stuff? Because it was out of the ordinary for them. Yeah. I guess I'd have to spend time at night in that community to see what's right. Yeah. I know on my street, cars come and go, like every 10 minutes a car goes by my house probably. So there would be no reason that I'd ever remember. See, and if I notice, and it's not even like I live super rural, but if a car drives down my street, I am that neighbor that I'm looking out the window, I'm like, who is that? Or heaven forbid, they stop in front of my house. I will be investigating. I'm that kind of neighbor. And you're in the Regina Rant and Rave Facebook group being like, whoever the prick is outside my house. I am in that group. I've never posted something like that, though. Oh, sure. But I would, if there's something going on, I always say, I have to keep a pack of cigarettes around the house so that I have a reason to be out on my porch. Oh, really? So you don't smoke, but you will smoke? I will, if it means that I can be out on my porch for a front row seat. Yes. You grab one of your gossip cigarettes and choke it back just to get a look at them? Oh, totally. Oh, yeah. You could probably find a healthier reason to, spy on your neighbors. I'd be out there, sweeping my lawn, trying to look inconspicuous. Yeah. Well, yeah. So this whole thing, these statements initially would have had to have been taken seriously, again, because they're in the documents, because they thought them valuable enough to actually redact them. The fact that they're now unsealed and the public can see them would imply that they're no longer a part of the investigator's theory, or they don't hold the investigative value today that maybe they did a month ago when the documents were originally unsealed. That didn't the media of grabbing a hold of the new witness statements and running wild with it, to the point that the RCMP were forced to respond. I'm going to read you a bit of a statement that the RCMP made just last week to address the unsealing of these statements and the tremendous amount of conversation that came as a result of that. Here it comes.
The RCMP said that they had found no evidence to support witness claims of a vehicle driving near the Sullivan family's home during the early morning hours of May 2nd, the time prior to Jack and Lily going missing. After reviewing surveillance footage from the Lansdowne station area, investigators reported no signs of vehicle activity and said no driver or vehicle had been identified. They concluded that the alleged vehicle movements were not substantiated and were not considered a key element in their investigation. Police noted that while witnesses reported hearing a vehicle, neither visually confirmed seeing one specifically. The statements from residents Brad Wong and Justin Smith, who both described hearing a loud vehicle multiple times that night, were included in earlier court documents but remain unverified and unproven. Stepfather of the children, Daniel Martel, denied driving that night, claiming that the claims were complete nonsense and emphasized that the family's vehicle never left the property, wasn't particularly loud, and no one visited the property the night prior to the children being reported missing.
It's the surveillance footage that they've gone through. Obviously, if there was something there, they would have found it.
You would think.
With the how many hours? Something like 1,000 hours of surveillance they've gone through. Like they want to find these kids just as much as we do.
Yeah.
So yeah, once I heard that all of this security footage and CCTV footage was being reviewed, they would have found something
you would
if
think,
these
yeah.
claims were legitimate.
One of the other pieces of information that has been unredacted in this newest release of the documents is information on how many video doorbells and security cameras in the area they were able to get access to, and there's a whole bunch. So I'm thinking that they're confident that if these vehicles were coming and going, they would have found them. What I wonder about though is that, and a lot of people will talk about this, is Daniel Martel does have an ATV, like a four-wheeler or a quad as people would call it. So some people are saying, could it have been a quad or quads coming and going?
Okay.
If that was the case, yes, you would hear them. And I don't know if the average layman, I don't think I could notice the difference between a car, truck, or a four-wheel ATV at 1:30 in the morning, a couple houses down sort of thing. But you would think during the ground search the next day, they would have noticed fresh ATV tracks. But then again, a part of Daniel Martel's statements involve him getting on an ATV during the early moments of the search. So I don't know if, tracks would have stood out at that point. So it does still raise a bit of a question. But again, the fact that the RCMP are unsealing this information would tell me they probably know more than we do, and they don't see this having much value anymore.
And unless they saw Daniel on an ATV or a quad, that would have also shown up in security footage.
You would think, yeah.
At some point,
I still because what this raises the question of is, did the children go missing the night prior to, or in the early morning hours, like 6 hours before they were reported missing, and did cars come and go and take the kids? So ultimately, that's what it all boils down to. If Daniel or Malaya were involved in this, and we say this, I think every episode we talk about these kinds of theories, if either one of them were involved, they all had to be, including Daniel's mother, because all three of those people reported hearing the children the morning before they went missing. And that's where I bang my head against every theory that seems to pop up that involves the parents. I don't see a world in which the three of them, Daniel, Malaya, and Daniel's mom, can work together to coordinate, something happening to the kids. And between that fact and the fact that this information is now unsealed tells me that maybe Brad Wong and Justin Smith did hear something, but maybe it wasn't connected to Jack and Lily. I don't see this having too much value.
Well, see, that's the thing with all the security footage and everything. Yeah, they haven't seen any cars or anything of noteworthy that they've told us, but that also means there's nothing. There isn't even a glimpse of either of them on any sort of security footage. There is not one breadcrumb.
Yeah.
And it's just
and how can that happen?
Baffling.
Yeah, because that also seems
exactly.
impossible. And I will say, in the second release of these documents, there's so there's so many few redactions now that it tells me like we're seeing almost all of the police investigation as of like mid-June, let's say. And yeah, there's not really anything there that would indicate that they're on the way to any specific theory or have anything to back up a theory. So it all seems so impossible. And the more we learn, the more access we get to the police investigation, the more impossible it seems. But I still don't see a world in which the parents can be involved. I also don't see a world in which two children can just walk away from home and completely disappear on a Friday morning in rural Nova Scotia at, about 9:30 a.m.
Well, you said something last episode that really stuck with me, and you said, like, maybe the police are also scratching their heads, just like we are. Maybe they don't know much more than we do.
And it's a terrifying thought.
It is, because, and that's honestly one of the only logical explanations of what's going on right now, because there's nothing to go off of. They've exhausted all avenues, and there's nothing.
Yeah, if there's three people at the home, once you interrogate them and interview them and go through their stories and go through their phone records, you find nothing. You look at other people in the kids' lives. If that doesn't lead you anywhere, you look at security footage in the area. If you find nothing there, then what do you do? And it seems like that's kind of the point this is at.
They brought scent dogs in. They brought cadaver dogs in. There's no, it's almost as if these children didn't exist in the first place.
Yeah. The largest ground search in Nova Scotia's history. It's shocking. But
it is.
When we look at those witness statements that we just heard from Wong and Smith, it does kind of hint at this sort of rumor mill that's fueling some of the tips, because Wong and Smith, they talk before the police get involved. They talk to each other.
Yeah.
The next unsealed bit of information is taking the whole rumor mill thing to the absolute next level. Let's take a quick break. When we get back, I want to talk about a fella named Darren Geddes. He's a relative of the children's mother, Malaya's. And people who are closely following this case online will have seen this guy's name and heard about him, because he pops up a lot making statements that seem to accuse Malaya of all sorts of things on social media. So his name gets out there. But for the most part, it hasn't been mentioned in any of these court documents. But in the newly released version, there's a whole bunch of unsealed information about the investigation and the back and forth with Darren Geddes, a relative of Malaya Brooks. We'll get to that after a short break. Ms. Madeleine Klein, in our prior episode, part 11, where we discussed the search warrant applications, one of the search warrant applications we discussed related to the police wanting to access a hard drive that was in the custody of the RCMP. And we speculated on, like, why is this hard drive in the custody of the RCMP? What could be on the hard drive? But all of that stuff, all of the information related to the contents of this hard drive and why it was important to them was all redacted, but not anymore. I will tell you right now that there is a whole bunch of drama on that hard drive, and all is going to surround Darren Geddes. And I will say perhaps an inability to not say more than he should on Facebook and YouTube and everywhere else. Let me just read you from the documents, and then we can talk about this guy. On June 26, 2025, Constable John Donaldson was provided with a USB thumb drive from Malaya Brooks containing video recordings of a conversation between Malaya's grandmother, Patty Pearson, and her relative, Darren Geddes. Darren Geddes has suggested in social media posts that Malaya may be involved in the children's disappearance, and he also suggests he may know the location of the children. Police have attempted to speak with him in person, but he's not provided context as to why he has or shares this theory. Because of the nature of the recordings and the conversation, and it is unknown if Darren Geddes knew he was being recorded, a records access order is being sought to review the video recording. So what that explains there is that Malaya brought to the police station a thumb drive that contained a video of her grandmother talking to another relative, Darren Geddes, and it was provided to the police, but because it seemed that Darren didn't know he was being recorded, they wanted to get a search and seizure application to access this information just in case. They didn't want to, spoil the evidence, I guess, is what's going on here. But already it's sounding...
Which is great.
Yeah, just good. It's just smart, being cautious.
Yeah.
They describe in the documents here, there's a part that describes the video recording. Here it is. The file provided to RCMP includes a conversation between, again, Malaya's grandmother Patty and Getty's, which was video recorded by a third party. The video recording captures Patty holding her home phone on speaker mode so that her conversation with Getty's could be heard. Corporal Matharu believed that there was an expectation of privacy and stopped the review of the recording to request this order be granted. So it seems like they opened the thumb drive, started to play this file, and see that it's Malaya's grandmother holding a phone on speakerphone, talking to Darren Getty's on the phone, and someone else is standing there recording her doing this. They started to play that file, and they're like, whoa, let's not watch this. Let's get the search and seizure application approved, and then we'll review the video. So all makes sense. Now, to get a bit deeper into it, there's a section of the documents that provides information on Darren Getty's. Here's what it says. On May 30th of 2025, Constable McIntyre and Corporal Wood met with Getty's as he said he wanted to meet with them to provide information on the disappearance of Jack and Lily. The following is a summary of the conversation. Getty's did not want to provide an audio recorded statement, but had a conversation with Constable McIntyre and Corporal Wood. The officer said Getty's was confrontational and invasive to questions asked of him and wanted police to provide him with information about the investigation. He became upset when his questions weren't being answered.
Oh, you just know that this is the uncle that, like, when you hear he's coming to Thanksgiving, you shudder.
Yeah, that's what it seems.
And what's with all these people not wanting to give statements? 2 children are missing. What's wrong with you?
And they don't give much more detail than what I just read, but it seems like he wants to give the police information.
But he wants information too.
I want to give you information, but I don't want it to be in the form of an official statement. It's like, dude, call Crime Stoppers or something. Like, don't waste people's time. It's like you.
But he's also like, I'm nosy. Can you tell me what?
Yeah,
you
and then
know
he's
too?
asking them questions, but it's going to get worse. So now there's a section of the documents titled Getty's public statements. Here's what they say. Using an alias, Getty provided an interview on a YouTube channel in relation to the disappearance of the children. Getty's put forward a theory that Malaya would have dressed the kids, took them to the road, put them in a vehicle with the intention of her being in the next vehicle out of there with her baby Meadow. During the appearance, again using an alias, he did say that what he was saying could be wrong and it could just be speculation. So that's the end of that statement. So what we're hearing here is that this guy also creates an alias, appears on YouTube channels talking about this case, putting forward theories that Malaya was involved, but at least he's smart enough to not present them as facts. He goes as far as to say, like, this could be, this is just speculation. This is just my thoughts on the thing. But the fact that the RCMP took this serious enough that they included it in their applications, they redacted it in the initial release because they didn't want the public to know this. They must have looked into this guy enough that they're like, yeah, that's just a bunch of nonsense. And now it's publicly available. What it tells me is that this guy was taken seriously just because he does have some kind of family connection with Malaya. But at the end of the day, it seems like he's no different than every other, wingbat in the comments on Facebook who's just posting their theory. It's just people are taking him seriously because of that connection. That's what it seems to me.
He's worse than the random dingbats because he's a family member. And I just know that the police call him the crazy uncle to each other.
Yeah.
They're like, have you heard from the crazy uncle lately? Maybe we should look back into him.
That must be so heartbreaking and troubling for everybody involved in this. If it's, when it's a tragedy that hits the family, and then you have one member who's just like, again, like on YouTube and making statements and just wasting people's time. Like we've kind of talked about how there was, thousands of tips. And I often thought, like, how many of those tips are just people telling the police about nonsense they read online? I bet you a whole bunch of them is, did you know that one of Malaya's family members said that he knows that she did it? And some of his statements also went on to talk about this theory that you'll see a lot online that there's no evidence of, that the children were taken and are being like spirited away on a native reservation somewhere. and that that they're being hidden away from Daniel and all this stuff. There's a lot of discussion about that online. We've talked about it on past episodes of the series. Some of those statements are supported by some of the things that Darren Getty said, which is it's
I would bet
ridiculous.
a large sum of money that any of the family members of either Malaya herself or any of their family members, if you ask them, are you surprised by his behavior? They'd say absolutely not. We totally expected this from him. Because there's no way that this is the first time he's pulled something weird like this.
That would be my guess as well.
He's got a history, I'm willing to bet.
Something like this happens in your family and you think you have credible information, you wouldn't be posting it online or appearing using aliases on YouTube.
No.
You'd be talking to the police and giving them a formal statement, not wasting their time trying to get them to answer your questions. But anyway, that is now unsealed. So that is in the public. I've kind of fought with even mentioning stuff related to him in the past because he does come up quite a bit in the online discourse surrounding this case. I've avoided it quite a bit, but now since it's in the public, I thought, let's talk about it. But I think hopefully that's the last we'll have to hear about that aspect of things. The next bit of information that is revealed, though, is probably in my mind the most interesting, but it was given the less attention by the media that was covering the further unsealing of the documents. And this all involves a phone call that, as far as I could tell, has never been reported before, that happens during some of the most important moments in the lead up to the children's disappearance. The phone call is one Malaya made to her mother. The phone call was unanswered, but just due to the timing of when this call was made is very, I think, critical. So I'm going to present you a bit of a timeline here of the morning the children went missing, according to their mother Malaya's statements. So again, I'm talking about the morning of Friday, May 2nd. Malaya wakes up at about 6 a.m. Her alarm goes off. She uses an app to report Jack and Lily weren't going to be at school that day. That's at about 6 a.m. She goes back to sleep. Daniel's asleep next to her. Meadow's asleep in a separate area and in a separate bed at this point. The house is quiet. Around 8 a.m., Malaya claims to hear Lily and Jack playing and laughing in their bedroom, which is in the bedroom next to Malaya and Daniel's. So it's at about 8 a.m. that Malaya actually hears the kids. The kids playing wakes up the baby, Meadow. Malaya, at the same time, at about 8 a.m., takes Meadow, puts Meadow in the bed with her, puts on like Netflix or a TV show or something with the idea of them all going back to sleep, with Jack and Lily in a separate area of the house playing. At around 9:40 a.m. is when Malaya and Daniel realize the house is silent. They go look for Jack and Lily, can't find them. Shortly after that is when the 911 call is made. So that is the timeline we knew up until now. And that timeline makes it so that about 8 a.m. to about 9:40 a.m., Malaya and Daniel were drifting in and out of sleep, hearing Lily maybe stick her head in the bedroom a couple times, hearing Jack and Lily play in the other room. But again, in my mind, at this point, I was expecting them to be kind of, half asleep, groggy-eyed sort of thing. And here's where the new information comes. What has been revealed through the removal of a redaction is that at 8:28 a.m., Malaya made a phone call to her mother that was unanswered. And this phone call hasn't been discussed in other parts of the documents. I haven't seen it appear in any of the timelines or interviews that Malaya gave to the police that were shown in the documents. This phone call just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because in my mind, if I'm calling my mom, it's for two reasons. One, I need something. The other is I'm just in the mood to chat. Those are the two reasons I call my mom. When I'm sleeping in, the last thing I'm doing is calling my mom to chat.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, no, that's me as well. Like when you call your mom, it's there's a purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just none of this adds up. You're right. It really throws a wrench into the supposed timeline that we've.
It's the supposed timeline, but also just kind of the feeling of the timeline. This idea that they're sleeping in. I picture them half awake, being like, "Oh, everyone, just be quiet. I want to sleep in." Meadow, just fall asleep watching Netflix. Let's just get another hour of sleep. if I'm doing that, there's no way I'm like, I'm also going to call my mom right now. It's strange to me.
Right.
There's a second phone call or another phone call she makes at 10:40 to her mom. That one makes more sense. It was also unanswered, but
Yeah.
that one makes more sense because I just spent the last 40 minutes panicking, freaking out, trying to find my kids. The cops are here. I'm going to call my mom because I need all the support I can get. The 10:40 a.m. call makes more sense, but this 8:28 call, that doesn't make any sense to me unless she was more awake than maybe I'm imagining it.
But also, then that doesn't credit the rest of their
Mhm.
story. Because if by 8:30 you were awake enough to make a phone call, I understand everyone's different, but like if I'm up at 8:30 isn't that
Mhm.
early. If I'm up and aware enough to make a phone call, my kid was just up, my two other children are up, wouldn't you just
Get up,
get
make a
up?
coffee, and mhm.
Right. And I've said this before, but an 18-month-old waking up and going back to bed at 8 a.m., that's
Yeah, good
weird.
luck. Yeah.
That's, like I said, 5, 6 a.m., fine. Bring her into your bed, try and get her to sleep for a little longer. By 8 o'clock, like the world is
Yeah.
moving. People start work at 8
Mhm.
o'clock. Like
Mhm.
I just find it hard to believe that Meadow would just chill and relax till damn near 10 o'clock at
Yeah,
night.
well, I've been in positions where with my kids, it's like I want to sleep a bit more, and I don't think they're going to fall back asleep, but I'll give them like an iPad or something, and I'm thinking like they're just going to sit and like watch something quietly, and I'll get to sleep another half
Hmm.
hour. Maybe they were doing that, but that phone call to me would just imply she was more awake than I was imagining. And if Jack
Yeah.
and Lily are awake in the other room, and you're at the point where you're making a call at least, it's just I thought that this phone call should have been better examined and discussed in the documents. It wasn't. But then again, the phone call, the fact that this phone call exists was previously redacted, which implies to me that the investigators saw this as something important that they didn't want the public to know about initially. You know what I mean? Like, because when you look at these documents, again, we're getting a glimpse at the investigation as of mid-June. When we look at the redactions that are there, that is the information that at the time they were unsealed was still important in a part of the investigation. So everything that's redacted is ultra important because it's still like it's ultra important to us as the public following this story because it's still important to the investigators. But now that this is unsealed, it's almost like it's no longer important, but at one time it was. So you kind of have to do a bit of time traveling. And I'm thinking that they probably had quite a few questions for her about that morning and specifically about this phone call if they didn't want the public to know about it.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know, like as time goes on, I've got more sympathy for these parents, right? Like I'm at this point where like pretty sure if they were involved, they we would have found out by now. But even if they had, no involvement in the children's disappearance, it kind of irks me that more care and attention wasn't given. What are you both doing laying in bed until almost 10 o'clock on a Friday morning?
Mm-hmm.
We're all tired. We all got kids. We're all tired. One of you get up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there will be a time for that discussion and that kind of criticism. But now I just feel like there's a few things here. I feel like the focus at this point should be on finding the kids and finding what happened to the kids. Then people should look for blame and accountability and liability and all this sort of thing. But for people who are going for the parents with like torches and pitchforks, often like they do make good points in some of the rants or in some of the accusations against the parents. But I'm just of the type where and of the mindset that I'm not willing to blame the parents without
No.
strong proof. But
Right.
there's definitely and I'm saying that maybe to defend myself a bit because we do get some criticism for like supporting Daniel and Malaya. My thing is I'm just not going to accuse them if I don't have a good reason to, but I will say there's stuff about both of them that I question. I question this phone call and how it affects the situation as it's been presented to the public. Then again, it hasn't been presented to the public by her. It's more so the media describing that morning. We haven't heard it directly from her. But again, as I've already said, in my mind, in my understanding was that the reason that they weren't there with Jack and Lily is because they were sleeping in bed, not in there making calls and stuff.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's this phone call stuck out to me as well.
Mhm. And of all of it, to me, this is the most interesting part.
I also think that 10:40 is very late to be calling her mother. Because you called her at 8:30 for whatever reason. Your kids went missing. 911 was called 40 minutes ago. I'd be on the horn with my mom very shortly after that.
Well, just to talk it out, you wake up, they're not there, you run outside, you're screaming for them, you're looking around, a couple minutes pass, you decide to call 911. You're on the phone with 911. You don't just call and say, "Yeah, send someone over." Bye. She's probably on the phone with them answering some questions as
Right.
they're dispatching vehicles and whatever. The cops get to the house a couple minutes after that, and they're then asking her questions and dealing with her. I think it's probably about 10:40 is when they're like, she has a minute to react.
Okay.
So,
And I guess reception's kind of in and out over there too. That was a big deal right at the beginning of this because they couldn't get, information back and forth, and she had to walk to this road to get reception and whatever
yeah,
else.
I didn't read too much into that 10:40 call. I'm thinking she's probably pretty busy from the time she calls 911. But it's a good point. Like, you make an interesting point. And there's a lot of interesting points made by people discussing this story, but there's also a lot of information that goes against a lot of these points and theories. And that brings me to a bit of a call out for what I want to do for our next episode. I've come across so many theories, and I see people talking about so many theories of what happened, of what's happened or what could have happened. And when I read them, I often think like, yeah, that's interesting, but there's this one detail that completely goes against it. And I thought what would be interesting to do is to do an episode where we compile, 5 or 6 of the more prevailing theories or ideas of what may have happened and compare those theories with what we know to be fact to see what holds water and what is absolutely impossible based on the facts that we know. Because at this point, with all of the information found in these search and seizure documents, we have a pretty good background to kind of compare against what may have happened. And that's what I'd like to do in the next episode. So with that, I want it to be a call out to anyone who has a theory or an idea or an opinion on this case. If you go to the canadiangothic.com/contact, send a voicemail and it could be anonymous. Let us know what you think may have happened. This isn't going to be, let's blame the parents in a podcast episode. It's going to be, let's compare the facts and what we know about this case against the ideas of what may have happened. That seemed like something we should do.
I think that's a great idea.
I think it'd be interesting.
But like we've said before, some people will never be convinced.
No, and it's not about convincing people. I think it's just about seeing where things fall. I think it'll be a good exercise, if nothing else. And I will say, like, I've this whole thing with the documents being released and then them being re-released with less redactions. I'm sure it's going to happen again. I think it's only a matter of time before we get even more information.
Because that's like that phone call, that 8:28 phone call just ruffles my feathers. I'm like, this is it. When I saw that, I was like, this is it. This is what's gonna crack the case open.
Yeah, it's odd, but
I guess not.
But we don't, and we don't know anymore. We don't see any questions the police had to her about this. And for all we know, she rolled over on her phone and her phone hit redial and called her mom.
That's true.
We
just don't know.
So yeah, it's never ending. As more information comes out, it just stirs the whole thing up. And this case just continues to capture attention of people all across the country, all across the world. And that is, again, we say this all the time, and that's for a few reasons. People will not accept that the fact that 2 children just wandered off and disappeared, that can't happen. But also, this is just such a mystery. It's a bit of a whodunit, but it's also just a lot of a mystery. And it's hard to look away from it when you just don't know.
Well, exactly. And like in this day and age of so much technology and tracking and tracing, it's unheard of that it would go on this long. Nothing like, is there another case that you can think of that, like, to our knowledge, parents weren't involved, no family members were involved, short of a kidnapping?
Yeah, there's high profile ones. Madeleine McCann is one that
often
often gets referenced, but The thing is you can kind of cherry pick the one or two big cases where something like this has happened and has remained unsolved, but they are like, like true crime eclipses. They're unique and they're memorable because they're so unexpected and statistically improbable. This one thing that makes Jack and Lily extra unique is the fact that it's two of them.
Yes. And like not a trace to our knowledge. It's like they were abducted by aliens, honestly.
It absolutely is. It's like they vanished completely into thin air. In looking through the search warrant applications, I've looked at them through many other cases, and generally in scrolling through them and reading through them and seeing the redactions slowly get removed, you can get a sense of the investigator's theory, and you can see them kind of looking for information to support their theory. In this case, I don't see any theory at all. I see them just checking everything, hoping something stands out, and so far it doesn't seem like anything has. And there's not a lot of redactions left.
Yeah, it's I can't believe how baffled this case has everyone.
I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of the Canadian Gothic. Now, before I wrap things up here, I want to send positive vibes to everyone affected by this case, and I also want to call out to anyone close to the case who would like to add their voice to this story. You can reach out to me, and I'd be happy to include you in an upcoming episode. Now, with that said, I'm going to start wrapping up this episode, but before we do, I'll have some thanks to pass out. First, a big thanks to Madeleine Klein for joining us for another episode of the Canadian Gothic. A big thanks to Monty Data, who contributes the music to this show, and Linz from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides our intro and outro voiceovers. And then lastly, but most importantly, a massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening to this show, as without your interest and your support, the Canadian Gothic would be as pointless as it would be impossible. Now, on the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers to the premium feed. Joyce, Kristen, and Delta, we appreciate you. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can help us out here in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple bucks a month, and that money will fund the creation of new episodes. But the premium feed will also give you those episodes 2 days early, give them to you ad-free, and give you access to a back catalog of episodes. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can go premium right now at thecanadiangothic.com/subscribe. And even if you don't want to go premium, you can still support the show by sharing this episode on social media and letting your like-minded friends know why they should listen. Your support is very much appreciated. Now, until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let us know if you see anything weird.
Thank you for listening to Canadian Gothic.